No,
I can't remember. Um,
no.
oh no. All right. So we are going to get started on everything that you've worked on right now with the wall
Okay.
building. So how is that going at the moment?
Okay, well, you figure I went through and essentially from kind of sequentially just kind of breaking apart the older system and looking at feedback points that we've gotten in the past in terms of how I guess you could say it was very hard to work with and get the kind of precision that you wanted at times. And obviously there was the aspect of the reliance of the engineers to always be able to find their point. So they were like, not stopping midway or doing other weird stuff. So I spent a considerable amount of time just kind of like looking over all the feedback points, playing Legacy, which was an experimental podcast, and then playing a couple other RTS games to kind of help ingrain or kind of give me some feedback points to kind of improve upon on the second go around. And here I will show you guys. Let me go ahead and bring up my share screen. And then what I'm going to do is load into the large RTS token map. And then I'm going to spawn in. And we will...
You just check out to play more Jurassic World Evolution and have a heart
I
attack
just played
with
it when you and Winter were in the room the other day. And then that was pretty much the extent of it. So
Yeah.
basically, one of the things that I did was make it to where it was a lot more like, I guess you can say, accommodating of basically building up to certain segments. And I got with my artists and we made sub variations of smaller walls. So like there's a half piece and a quarter piece now. And the system will dynamically determine which one to place in based off of the perceived math, in terms of like, oh, use a quarter piece here, use a half piece here. You can scale these up to a certain like percent per se. And then essentially it just kind of goes from there. So you can see like, okay, there's a good example of where like I had to work on Monday going into is that he failed like actually building the next chunk. That was something that I showed off on last night where it was like, that's something I need to kind of work on. But anyhow, if I click here and I build some walls, I will show you, actually I'll build the gate. So the gate is actually placeable outside of like doing the upgrades. That was another big feedback point that people were like kind of hitting us on there in terms of like, hey, like you need to be able to build these gates, without having to upgrade them in place because then you can't get them where you want them to be. So that was a big thing that I did. And then basically just making sure that, you can rotate it like everything else with the directional keys. You can place it like, let's say you want to place it here. And then you're like, okay, cool. Now I want to close off this section here. Oh, that guy's in the way. I want to close off. Let me move him. That's something else I got to get in there is when the formation system's a little bit more polished up in a couple of days. I have to make it where they understand that like they need to move out of the way. But basically, you can do stuff like this basically now. And obviously the gate's not in yet. I'm going to be getting that gate in going into Monday, where essentially like I have to program the door, add in the states, and get it to where everything just kind of functions there. So just be aware of that. That's something that I am working on going into Monday. And then one of the other things that I've been focusing on is getting the I guess you can call it like a helper system. Where like if I tell this guy, let me pause the game. Let's say I tell this guy to build this active denial system. And then I tell this person to build this wall right here. And then basically I tell another person to build a spotlight over here. And then I tell that guy to help. What they'll do is every time someone finishes a task, they scan the nearby area to find other areas where they can help. It's kind of like an auto build system, where essentially like, okay, like within 3,000 centimeters, they'll scan nearby entities that are still in construction and they'll seek to help them finish those constructions. So you don't have to sit there and babysit them. It looks like there's a bug where sometimes they get grabbed by this structure over here. I don't know why, so I'll have to look into that. You saw that earlier in the podcast where like they were just like finishing a structure and then running over there for some reason. But like if I were to say grab half and tell them to build a smaller wall, pause the game, tell another group to build even like, a larger wall. It goes this way. They'll finish their task and then immediately come over and help. I haven't added the ability for them to do repairing yet, but like I said on the announcement ping yesterday, if there's a demand for it, I'll add that in there. I didn't want units running over and getting themselves killed for a repair order because the units get damaged pretty consistently. So I wasn't really sure on having an auto repair. So that's something I need to kind of come back to and just kind of get to the point where we get a playtest. Because my concern was units like running on the other side of the wall and then getting themselves killed.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm just blind or something, but was that little laser beam for the
Oh yeah, Dimitri snuck in the
repair
new
tool
welding
always there?
effects. Here, let me zoom in
That
so you
looked
guys can see it. Is basically this is the other bug I got to work on.
that
Is
looked
that they
really
don't understand which side they need to be on. Like they are already on the correct side, but they decide to flip to the other side. So that's something in the math that I need to work out going into Monday. Is basically ironing out that kind of logic. And then you can see the new weld tool animation at work. All of the build times aren't final. Like they're just 3 seconds. So for debugging. And you can see like they all just kind of contribute to that spotlight. So it got insta-built like instantly. And it works out pretty great. So like you figure if I select this guy and let me move the mouse. If I select that guy and I put a barracks there, and then I pause the game and I put a motor pool here, and then let's say I build, hold on. Let's say I build a tack sensor there, and then we'll put a wall there. We'll put a wall over here. They'll automatically just figure out like, oh, that guy has already called in the sky crane here. I don't need to do anything else. He'll skip that task and then immediately come over here and help out on the active denial. But I only gave the order to one guy to build this wall. But they were all within the auto range, so they came over and helped for that 3,000 UU range. So it's coming together great. It took a good period of time to basically just get it to this point of just getting the wall builder, because we built that from the ground up in a better, more efficient way. And we took the previous code, which was all in blueprints. So the wall builder was originally written in blueprints because it was just easier at the time to do. But this time around, we had a better understanding of what we wanted to do, and we wanted to base the entire system in C++. So now everything you saw is entirely in C++, and the only things that are in the widgets or blueprints would be the UI stuff of like clicking on here and the health bar appears and the little selection box appears. Where it's like we're probably going to have to finesse the actual selection box because there's so many different types of scales and measurements now. So you might see some stretching or skewing going on the next couple of weeks. These are static objects, so I can't select those. But that's something else that we'll probably we don't want to spend too much time on that logic, and we'll come back to that, I would say, in the next week or two before we aim to kind of have like a public playtest, is see what we can do to ratchet up and improve that code. Because that's basically just dynamic code that's essentially saying like, hey, take the bounds and essentially like find where you should put the progress bar, find where you should put the health bar, find where you should put the selection, the health, and the progress bar for building and repairing. And let's see what else was there. Let me give myself some more money and I'll show one more thing, and then that's pretty much it, because that rounds out pretty much my week, was just working on the wall builder, because it was a lot of back and forth. So like I didn't really show it too well, but we put snap points again back on the walls. I know it's not revolutionary, but I just wanted to show that was working. And then it allows you to bridge to pre-existing assets to a certain degree. Like I made it to where you can get pretty damn close to objects now, because in the previous version there was a huge gap. Oh my god, the gap was like 3 to 4 feet in some cases. So it was one of those things where it was like I spent a considerable amount of time. I was hoping to be done by Tuesday, Wednesday, but the deeper I went, the more it unraveled. In terms of basically like, okay, well, that one guy said on Steam this, but those Steam reviews said that, and then people in Discord said this. So it was a matter of like looking at all of the feedback points and being like, well, I can't leave it with it not doing this, because I said I was going to fix that previously to a guy on Steam. I said I was going to do this to another guy in a Steam review. So it was about basically like taking the time to make sure that when this wall builder is like out to you guys, it's done. Because the same fundamental system of this, how this is comprised, is the same way the sandbags, the barbed wire, the Hescos, the double barbed wire, like all of that, it goes off of the exact same code here. The only thing is the mesh changes, the health changes, and like that kind of stuff. But it's still the same underlying system. So by doing the walls and doing them correctly, then I can have it to where you can snap on barbed wire to walls. So the same way that I basically did that, I'm building it in the next version going into Monday, Tuesday, where you can click here and you can drag off a thing of barbed wire. You can click here and you can drag off a thing of Hescos. It'll have that level of interoperability where everything just kind of seamlessly comes together. And essentially, you can kind of like have a lot more control over how you build your bases. Let me reset and let me delete these mockups because like this was basically me sitting in a level, just kind of like building it how I think I wanted the system to work. Where it was like building it like a level designer, where the idea is like you just kind of take a bunch of pieces and you throw them into the level, and then you figure out like, okay, this is how I want things to connect. Now I need to figure out the math and the associating code behind it to accomplish that. So I would love to take you guys' questions about this when we get towards the end. Some guy mentioned the repairing and being able to do that. If you guys want that, mention it at the end and let's talk about that. And then my compromise would be is having like an auto repair where if in like say 1500 UU, if they've repaired something, because the biggest thing is you don't want them autonomously doing it. I feel like I'm not really. I feel like that's too much automation and it opens up the range for error. Is I feel like auto repair towards wall should probably be like intentionality. If you right click a wall and then when they finish that wall repairing, they scan for other walls, but they don't do it forever because then you'll get a leapfrog effect where they could go into an area that you didn't expect. So at least in that case, you can kind of manage them and like, okay, this guy's going to repair all the walls down this segment at least. But I could be wrong. So we can discuss that and we can hit upon that later in the podcast towards the end. And then you guys can give me your extenuating cases that I'm not thinking of. And then there's a conversation to be had there. So again, I'm not like, if you can come up with a good counter argument or reason that I'm overlooking it, let's talk about it. Because one of the biggest things that I want to do going into this week is I need to finish this. So I need to finish the structure system of what you've just seen because it's not replicated yet. So it's not supported for co-op yet. So I need to, going into Monday, Tuesday, add in the wall builder, like the sandbag or the Hescos, make sure that's working. And there's no weird insinuation cases where that breaks. And then once I verify those are working and firing on all calibers, it's getting the gates online. So the gates open and close, adding those two states to them. It would be fixing the engineer bug that I showed you guys earlier, where the engineer will fidget. He doesn't know if he should be on the left side or the right side of the wall. So he'll start building a wall segment. I think I'll show you guys. I should be able to get it to break. It's like, let's say you build like a very like, it only happens if you get a group to join after the fact. Because if I build them in order, then they build them in order of like doing it. So let's see. I think that it happens when you do this. And then you do that. And then you pause it. And then you do that, and then you figure when they finish the lighthouse, there's a calculation issue that I need to fix where like they'll be like, oh, we're already in the inner wall, but let's run all the way over here to build a wall that literally all we had to do is just walk 3 steps. See, there they go right there. Where they calculated they need to go over here and help. And watch, this is another system I put in where like right there, they calculated that the wall was completed, so they didn't even bother. That was a bug that I showed last Saturday, I think it was, where there was no callback system. So if somebody finished the structure on the way there, if they don't have something in their queue, then they'll just dynamically find something else to do. So then that way, you don't get engineers that are like, they have to still go to a physical object, interact with it, and then figure out if it was done a minute ago, 10 seconds ago, 5 seconds ago. So, did it just fail? Oh, yeah, they got stuck in an object, so that's cute. Oh, what's that? Okay, so the navigation's failing to update there, so it looks like there's some kind of oddity with these objects in Snap. Okay, so I'm going to have to look into that one. Well, It's a good thing I'm finding these now. And this is the other issue, where if they're not inside the build radius, they don't detect they need them. They shouldn't have to move. They should just do it. So let's see. Yeah. That's some kind of bug with the navigation. Let me see what that is. Yeah. The navigation gives them the impression that they can go through that gap, but their capsule's too large. So that's something that I'm gonna have to fix in their navigation generation, where I'm gonna have to make it to where it's not as accommodating. There's a desynchronization between their physical collision and the navigation updating. So I have to go into the project and increase their capsule navigation generation code. So then that way it's like it would have invalidated that. So they don't try and go through that. Or the other option is decreasing their capsule size. I don't know. Let's look. If I could, yeah, their capsule is that little spear, and that handles their collision. You know what? I could probably shrink that a little bit because, yeah, their capsule is a little too big. If I were to shrink that capsule by at least probably till it goes to their shoulders, it would mean they can fit to that area. So that's a desynchronization between two systems. That's just how the Unreal Engine works, is there's not a synergy between your character's collision and your navigation mesh. Everything is static values, and you have to manipulate it and change it in real time, or you have to just make sure that your static values in the ini files are one-to-one to the capsules, kind of deal. So yeah, that there's always a margin there for failure. So I'm sure if I go over here, and that's the formation system kicking in. Oh, I didn't rebuild the navigation, so those are the objects that I deleted earlier. Yeah, so now they're going to fix, because basically I had to move them around to the other side. So that's kawaii. Yeah, then he's going to break again, because he's like, this is the issue I was talking about, where he'll dynamically be like, oh, I need to be on that side of the wall. And then he gets stuck again. And then he thinks he wants to fix this one, but he can't get there. So yeah, that's a good example of a bug that I'm going to have to iron out. Let me delete that wall, just so they can finish the task at hand. So yeah, I would say at least another 24 to 48 hours to get this to a point where I'm happy with it, and it is damn near impossible to break. Because again, that's my goal, is that like you figure like you have to be going out of your goddamn way to break this. Like Age of Empires, building your units into a wall and then they can't get out. So I don't want to move on until this is bulletproof, because the fundamentals, the core of the game is building. And I can't tell you how many times that I've read a review, a Steam post, a Discord post of someone saying how frustrating it is. You don't want your building system to be frustrating. You want it to be fun. You want it to be rewarding into the gameplay loop. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I'm definitely going to have to spend a couple more days just ironing out this kind of thing where the collision desynchronization, not desynchronization, but basically it needs to be further configured. I need to fix the gates so they open and close, add in the states. We'll have that discussion about the repair at the end. And then, I think that would be a good point to evaluate it, give it one last final look, do the replication. Then when the replication is done, the same system will work for the operator. So then I'll go in and I'll spend a day or so coming up with the blueprint system, which I talked about last week, where basically the operator can build structures, kind of like the Forest would be the closest game I'm looking at as an example. So that's what I'll be looking at, is like games like the Forest. Now, obviously, you won't be able to build walls to the same proficiency, so I'll have to figure that out. Because like I know in the Forest and in Rust, for where you're building walls on the and like they're kind of operator first person or third. Actually, no, they're both first person games. I'm sorry. You have to place them individual chunks, so I'll have to figure out how that's gonna work. Maybe I have to look at Fallout. No, Fallout is also the wall chunk. So yeah, maybe I'll have to make it to where you can't build walls as the operator right off the bat, because I'll have to design an entire new system for that, and then we can put that later on. Because, and we'll talk about this later in the podcast, is one of the most important things for us is basically doing this and then doing it in a way that's better than what we did before, and it takes into consideration the feedback that we've gotten over the years from you guys in terms of what's mission critical. Like there was a thing last week about the wall curving. That's not mission critical. It's nice to have, but it's not instrumental. It's not going to break the bank in terms of like having a wall curving. And putting that kind of feature and mechanic in would take a week minimum, from the math to the new wall assets to everything else. And my goal going into getting into February, going into March, going into April, is trying to keep us on as tight as a schedule as possible. Because like me and Durvar were talking about this last night. We're roughly hitting about 5 to 10% of the game every week. So that means that we're on our trajectory, and we have to keep on that trajectory to the best of our ability and make concessions when we have to make concessions of improving or changing some things like the wall builder. What are you gonna say, Durvar? Yeah, and
no,
and then
disagreeing.
and then basically like essentially like okay, some of the systems like the barracks, like I'll show that right now actually, is that the barracks was fine. The only thing that we took out of the barracks was being able to train unit veterancy, and you have to gain veterancy just by playing the game now. Because I should just actually went that to the larger map because this one looks retarded. So let me spawn in. Oh, you know what? I lied. There was something else that I did, and I relegated it to just it didn't really matter. Let me show you guys the other thing, and let me increase the I don't know why this monitor resets its contrast every bloody week when I turn it on. But one of the other things that we did was we got the unit recruitment back online, and we got the weapon market preliminary system, and I got the cable component system back online. So we ended up doing a dynamic system. So level designers can configure, or designers per se, because everyone's a hybrid here on this team, can design a dynamic amount of cable points on structures, and it doesn't require programmer intervention. And we got this little like preliminary cable system back up and working from legacy. We improved it and improved the stiffness of everything and got all that situated. It's very for surface value and whatnot, but I just wanted to show that we did get that back in because that was something that we hadn't really shown. There's some error resorption issues when it moves really fast, but we're not going to spend too much time on that, and we'll probably come back to that in polish. Because one thing that I was talking to Durvar about is that when the ropes snap and they break, I spawn a ball and I send them upwards like that. But it needs more polish because you figure like it's too abrupt and too fast. I need to add some sub-stepping, and I need to basically add some like how do I explain this? Cable components are like objects where you have a start point and an end point, and you attach the start point to something, and you attach the end point to something. But the problem is there's no way of manually animating a cable component in the Unreal Engine, so you have to attach it to a dummy invisible object, and then apply a force to it, and then send it up. Think of it like a basketball, and you're throwing that basketball up. That's something that I want to do going into like the next couple weeks for polish when I have some free time. It's not mission critical right now. It's making it to where the snaps and the breaks look more convincing by adding a slower ball that is invisible, it's a dev object, that when it lands the structure, it spawns this ball, it attaches the cable component, and then it sends the ball up on a trajectory upwards, and that would simulate the cable snapping. And then we could add a sound effect, and we could do all the other cool stuff and have a really controlled, break there. So you can see like the unit recruitment's in. Oh, it looks like Derek didn't expose it yet because it wasn't done. But like you figure if I click here, you can see the timer at the top right's counting down, and then they're going to drop. The C5 is going to come in the next couple of days going into Monday. Derek was literally working on the market. I guess he didn't add it yet because it wasn't done. I'll show a screenshot of that progress in a second. But they're going to start dropping in about 5 seconds. All right, so now they're on the plane. He did take the time to also increase the UI and just make it more pleasing to the eye. And we'll talk about the UI also in a bit because you figure I put someone in charge of polishing up the AI and the UI to make it just pop more, basically. And we'll talk about that in a second. So here, let me maybe I have to do slow-mo. Is it gonna go? Let's see. There it goes. So you can see the green box is the system finding safe points for them to land where they can basically actually interact with gameplay. Because again, like, oh, did that fail? Oh yeah, that's a fail. That is definitely a fail. Okay, I'm gonna have to take a picture of that. I don't think Derek tested it enough for that kind of environment. So you figure the navigation builds there, but he made an assumption that the unit could get down. So that would be a bug that we would have to basically fix. Where's my snippy tool? Hold on, I gotta take a screenshot of that so I can document it for the programmer. Because again, you're gonna say?
Sorry.
All right, let me put that in Dirk's channel. Okay, yeah, because that's a bug. That shouldn't have happened. What the system should have did is it should have gotten points around the barracks, and it should have used that as like using that as the safe harbor. Where the idea would be is that you use that as a bias to determine, oh, like if the unit parachutes down, if they can reach like a couple points around the barracks and it's safe and they're on the navigation, because like technically technically they're on the navigation, because like that could be a rooftop or something like that, but like we don't want them just doing that where they like land on like that technically there's navigation there, but it's not connected navigation. So that's like a distinction that he's going to have to fix going into Monday to make sure that doesn't happen. But you can see that the unit recruitment is go.
Something
Ooh,
I
we
did
got a
notice
little
about
OVO
the
issue going on
unit
there.
recruitment
Yeah, go.
deployment is I'm not. Is it Michael
Michael
who
handles the
handles the
animations.
animations for the units deployed? So he must have added the leg swing to when they deploy the parachute, because that wasn't in there before. They used
Let's
to
look
just
at that.
drop down and as a
So
static.
I just spawned them in. Let's see. Let me do slow-mo 5.
Because I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure if it's just my mind playing tricks on me, but I'm pretty sure I saw like a little leg swing.
Here they come. What? Is he falling? Oh yeah, he's doing like an idle where like he like actually is like skydiving thing. But like that, there's an IK issue going on here. So I got to screenshot that for Michael. Hold on. Because you figure what's going on there is the IK is not snapping properly. It's not disabling the gun snapping. So that's like a simple little trivial bug that Michael's gonna have to fix with Derek going into Monday. Because again, it's trying to snap the left supporting hand to the gun, and because the gun is outside of its arc, he can't. So like, let's see. They come down so fast that it's hard to tell for that detail. I don't think there's any movement there. I think that's just a static pose.
There was definitely a leg swing.
Well, I can't see it from my distance, but I'll take your word for it. But yeah, no, it's one of those things where like that's just actively in work progress, and it's one of those things where like we're gonna have to fix this kind of issue going into Monday, and then get the weapon market online, which I'll show you guys the progress towards that from his collaboration channel. So right now, this is how it's looking. And essentially, we got rid of the veterancy because it never made sense. It was an idea from the XCOM days where we were trying to make the game more like essentially like you could train veterancy and whatnot. We were trying to like make a change there, make it a little bit different, but it never really kind of worked out. No one ever used it based off of our analytics. It's one of those things where it should have just been a veterancy by combat. And we just have units that can boost the veterancy, like Winters, like other units. So when we do the revamped ability system, when we add in the new ability system from Legacy and then we replicate it, we just need to make like a passive ability that makes it to where like Winters or like your operator can boost the experience. And then you get the actual experience and the combat prowess just by playing the game. And then one of the things that we're going to do, and we'll talk about that in a second, is that Winter's been in charge of doing the UI. And he comes from a background of doing like website design, a bunch of like UI designs. So it's in good hands for him to basically kind of like work with Janari, our concept artist, to get this kind of stuff finalized. Because you can see like Derek's still working on the scaling. Like the M4 is so damn tiny. So it's like he's getting the widget all set up. He's setting it up so it auto scales based off of your desktop resolution and a bunch of other stuff. So he's going to the nitty gritty and setting it up, building it in C++ so we have better interaction between the systems and not making the underlying widget in blueprints, widget code. So then that way it's easier to talk between all the systems. And it's just easier to also extend at the same point. Because we learned a lot over the last couple of years of the best practices. So again, you got that. You have basically the recruitment coming in. Let me bring up the list. Where is it? Hold on. Here it is. So, and then you can see right here, he's working on the presets and bringing all that back over. And like this is kind of how it looks, where you have like this little widget, and then but the parents in C++ essentially. as you can see on the top right, where it's not based off of user widget for any people that do game design. And he's essentially just building all the underlying systems and spending a little bit more time just to make sure it's very easy to extend and work with this system. I don't know why I did that. And he's setting up the presets, getting it so it loads the save files, because that's basically a save load system for the presets that we had in Legacy. And he's re-adding up all that in so you can have your presets. And then he's bringing in all the weapons. So he's setting up Winters, the Assault, and the Engineer first with all of their weapons and all of their toolkit. And then once we're happy with that, then we're going to bring over the Heavy, the Spec Ops, the Sniper, the Radio Man, and scale that up. So that'll happen over the next week or so as these systems come in, they're approved, and they're implemented. And then let me see here. Did you anything else you want me to hit upon for this section, Derivar, if I move on to the level design and module stuff?
I think we can move on, yeah.
So one of the other things I just want to touch upon this, well, I think we do it towards the end, towards the podcast, because that's more of a question opener. So Michael's been basically going back and trying to get every tidbit of performance out of the game without affecting visual fidelity. Now, in this example on the left, that was the first version. The one on the right is the second version. Well, you can see like the one on the left is more baked down like a traditional RTS game where there's a lot of generalizations and like I guess you could say morphing going on, because essentially like he's trying to keep the poly count as low as possible, but we've been tweaking and adjusting, rather he's been tweaking and adjusting and hyper optimizing the textures to get them to where at the lowest LOD they look damn good, like the guy on the right. So it's just been a manual process of baking down and cleaning up the assets left, right. Left is what he had in the engine. Right is what he's been tweaking and improving. Because over the week, I looked over some of his assets and I rejected some of them. Because again, like, yeah, it's hyper optimized, but it doesn't look good. People want to zoom into the characters. They want to walk around with the operator and look at them. They want to maybe make machinima, record videos, take screenshots. And we're not the normal RTS game. We have a very cinematic, very close presentation of our characters, more of a focus on the individual than the group, which means that you can't afford to put like budget restrictions on our characters, like say Company of Heroes or Total War, where they're like very, very like 5K, if not less, polygon characters. So we put a lot of time and effort in hyper optimizing them and tweaking them and making sure there weren't like weird merges and weird things that happen, that when you bake down an asset and you make LODs, typically you use a program like Simplygon, or you use like the licensed version of that in the Unreal Engine that does it for free, or you do it by hand, which is, people don't really do that too often anymore. But you figure this is an example of just kind of going through and making sure that every character is looking the best they possibly can for those moments. So like, here's another one, like, you know, even just their boots. And getting the sub detail, getting the normals, getting everything situated where there's an effort for every pixel, every aspect of the character to make sure they look the best they can, just by manual vetting of looking at like literally every section of the character and making sure like, can we do a normal map there? Do we do the actual polygons and the vertexes here? You know, well, you can fake it, you fake it like a normal map. And when you can't fake it, then you put in the actual detail if it doesn't look convincing. So he's been kind of going through and just kind of tweaking that and improving it to make these characters final. Because the big thing going into 2025 for us was the game needs to be done. It needs to be like situated in terms of like, we're not making any more changes. The system gets baked in. Once co-op is in, it's finite, and we're building on it. And we're changing things in terms of like maybe adding in, like I talked about for Jacob, the wall curving, if that makes sense later down the road. Adding in world events, you know, adding in the sub factions like Pearson. Now they were building on it instead of just constantly going back and changing things. So this is one of the things that he's been working on. And then here, there's actually a couple other pictures. Let me load those up real fast. And then we'll move on to what Dimitri's been doing. Here are some examples of some of the gloves. Okay, yeah. Hold on. I can't tell which one's the old one and which one's the new one. I think he was just playing around with different textures. But some of the gloves for some of the characters, where essentially he's just kind of going through and just doing the actual sub detail and making them look the best they can with their textures. That's just a really good texture. And just spending the time to paint it and adjust it and tweak it to make sure that, like, characters look as the best they possibly can. Now, you're always going to have a divide. You're going to have it to where your operators are double the quality of your RTS units, because if you have to scale it based off of like how many units are there going to be. So there's 100 assaults. You can't have the quality of 100 assaults for the operator, where each character is like a Lara Croft, where she's like 60k, 80k polys. So you have to like maybe curve around 20, 30k, which is what Gears of War 2 did back in the day, where like the locusts were around 20 to 30k, give or take. So we're using like roughly that, but we break that convention sometimes for small little areas, and we just basically make the LODs hyper aggressive to where it ramps them down. Like from LOD 1 or 2, it's a very quick change. So people that want to get close and want to record, take pictures, and just appreciate the vehicles and the helicopters and all the units up close, they can get that detail they're looking for in those small little nooks and crannies. And we use nanite where applicable to make it to where like we convert the vehicles into static objects, kind of like the elemental demo at times. Like the vehicle, like the structures. When the structures are baked down, when you deploy a structure, or if they don't have an animation, they are immediately converted into a static mesh because it's cheaper. We do the same concept with nanite for the structures and for the vehicles. For parts of our vehicles, like the Abrams, they're like 1 million polys, like 2 million polys. Some of our vehicles, like the Bradley, but you can't tell that based off of nanite and basically how Dimitri does what he does. So it's one of those things where it's like, and your video card still sleeps on the game, because nanite is just a brilliant solution for dynamic LODs that scale up or down and do a lot of like caching and streaming to make it to where like you can't tell the difference. You can put like a 2 million rock in the game and it just automatically will scale it up and down based off of how far you're away from the object. It's some kind of magic I don't even fully understand. I think Dimitri's the other one that kind of has a better grasp of how to understand it, how to explain it. But it's one of those things where like we're utilizing all the latest Unreal tech, especially towards the end of Legacy, for level design to make the levels pop and look as visually appealing as possible, without compromising on like performance. Because again, far as all of our benchmarks always said that our performance was going towards the CPU, and the GPU was sleeping, which is what nanite and all the other things are hitting on primarily. So that's one of the interesting tidbits we're going to do, where like we move, and with this redo, we moved more of the visual elements onto like the UI elements of the Niagara effects are running more on the video card, so we can balance load out. Like it's cheaper to render and do certain instruction sets on the video card than doing the CPU. So it's one of those things where we just kind of going through and like balancing and tweaking things as we go, and making sure that we're just kind of having a good budget there. So that is in a nutshell what Michael's been working on. He's been rigorously going through and getting all that situated. Now we'll talk about what Dimitri's been working on, and then we can move on to Efren for Alcatraz. So Dimitri has been basically going through and correcting some older legacy assets like I talked about previously for the structures that were in the, like this one. He got this one in, got the texture in for the large generator. I don't think I actually showed that last week. I am so sorry. I think I mentioned I was going to show it this week, and then I completely did not show it. So you can see here, we have the icons are pending because I have to send them over to Dimitri, but we got the medium generator. And then you have the large generator, which basically is like, it's massive in terms of the amount of energy you get for these. It's like, this is double, that's triple, and we'll balance and we'll tweak when we get to the point of actually play testing it. But you can see right there the auto build in order. I didn't tell them to do that. But you figure like, here's the 2 generators that we got into the game for when we get the next play test going, where you guys will not have to build like 6 or 8 generators of these the smaller ones anymore. And where you can fit them, you can put these smaller, you can put the larger one, like this is the legacy one. This is like 75 power. That's 150. This will probably be 300. We'll probably, depending on balancing, we might even increase it. But this is like 100. That's like 200, 300. That's 500. I have to do some play testing. I got to see. Because remember, we did that poll on Discord and we were like, hey, do you guys want sector power, localized power like in Fallout, or like just normal power like in Command and Conquer 0 Hour? And everyone like really like aggressively voted for sector-based power, where the zones in Legacy are going to be, they power the entire subdivision of that zone. So if you build a generator in that zone, it's going to provide power for that entirety of the zone. And you don't have to worry about cable management. You don't have to worry about proximity to structures and all the other, like, babysitting that you had to do in the older versions. So that was something that you guys voted for on the Discord pretty aggressively. And that's something that we're going to start showcasing more and more as we get to getting closer to an actual build. Because we'll talk about this towards the end before we open it up for discussion in terms of what we're aiming for now, in terms of our timeline. And then that way we'll open it up as at the end so you guys can ask questions and throw in your 2 cents and everything else. Okay, so that's essentially what Dimitri did. He's been working on every structure, fixing their collision, and editing models, making new wall variants for me, because he has to make new wall variants for the tier 2 and the tier 3 for a 1/2 and a 1/4 piece, which I'll really briefly show, and then we can move on so I don't drag this out. So like if I go to here, and where are you? And no, that's another thing I'll mention is that we're going to be putting, I'm going to be putting in the larger wall that was relegated, because you're not going to be, maybe. This will be a build off where you can build a gate that's like double the width that we had in our content browser for like the better part of like 3 years that it's never been implemented because of how hard it was to work with the older system. But now I can make this wall buildable in 10 minutes or less with the newer system. So I'll be putting this gate in, going into Monday as well. So here, let me scroll over. And let me go and find, here you are. So you can see this is what Dimitri's working is these 1/4 pieces and wall pieces for every tier. We abandoned the scaffolding because they weren't going to work out that well visually, and we were going to be scaling them really awkwardly. We might come back to the scaffolding in the future if there's a demand, but I just preferred the hologram and keeping it more consistent. And then you can see those are my 2 base blueprints and my data assets to associate with them. And then we put quite a bit of time making it to where, oh my God, why does it keep opening on that window? That is bloody annoying. We basically wrote a dynamic system where Dimitri can add new wall variants in the future that are different sizes, like a 1/4 piece and a 1/2 piece. And then we can make more sub-stepping. Where the idea is let's say Dimitri gets a lot of free time, he could go in and add a smaller piece or a larger piece. And then the system would dynamically juggle them and figure out which piece to put that's best in every situation. And then you can see there's the build time, there's the build radius, and then it's a wall. Some of this needs to be audited and simplified, like the structure here, and then there's wall here. Those need to be auto-determined based off of the class type. So we're going to have to do an audit and change them and clean up a couple of things before we scale up and bring over all the other classes and bring over a crap ton more of gameplay elements just to make sure that things are as simple and intuitive as possible, where you can make certain assumptions based off of class type or actor class. I know I'm getting overly technical here, sorry. So there was something I was going to show. Oh yeah, basically he's just making more variations for the tier 2 and the tier 3s and all the other fun stuff. And then he's working on a replacement turret for the field turrets. So we'll show that sometime next week. He's looking at we were looking a lot at prototype. As I mentioned this briefly on and off, Al, is that one of the things that we wanted to do was get rid of the field turrets and give it to the engineer. We have to do that now because you figure ultimately it's one of those things where it's before he goes on to Alcatraz and helps effort on that, he needs to help me on the programming elements of the structures and the walls and the gates to make sure everything's working. Everything's firing all calibers. Everything is the collision's perfect. And then he can go on and help build the interior of Alcatraz and then help on San Francisco North when they get to that goal in the next couple weeks. So it's one of those things where if I bring up the, we were looking at different designs of prototype and whatnot, and he's doing a block out. It's not going to be final, but we have to program in the first turret in the next couple of weeks for the first playtest. So then that way you guys can have like everything that generally is expected in Cepheus and the core. The ability system won't be in on the first playtest, but it's also like going over the restrictor and getting that a proper mesh because that looks like dog shit. It's like looking at like the here, let me bring up this reference because he was very keen on using something like this and making like a circ version of it for the here, let me open it up. Where's my edge? He was keen on making like some kind of custom module like this for the turrets, getting rid of the old field turrets and replacing them with the finalized version, where there's a platform and then you have a missile and an MG version, and we can change that in the future for anti-air and whatnot potentially. But right now we were just looking at like, okay, we need to replace the field turrets with something that's more final. So he's going through, and he'll ideally have something to show going in the next week, where he'll have like the final turrets, and then the field turrets that were buildable by the engineer are going to become abilities or pets, where basically you can essentially use those to like deploy them like aliens, or they're just like disposable pets that you just kind of set up as fixed defenses. So that's something that he's working on, and we'll have something to show. And then the other thing is he's just getting the final mesh constructed for the restrictor, because it's been a block out for 4 years. And that needs to go. Where like it was based off of the concept of Half-Life 2's restrictor, where the idea is it was like a thumper that would essentially scare away the antlions. We got the same idea for the worms. So it's one of those things where he's going to be looking at that inspiration and coming up with some kind of original design going into the next couple weeks to essentially get that structure done and polished and finalized, so you guys don't have to look at an ugly blockout that's been in the game for a couple of years. So I'm leaving him on structures. He's going to take it all the way down the line, get it done, get it situated, and then that way we're for the better for it. Because this time around, getting the game like into this co-op state, getting it cemented so it's done, is getting it to where again, like I mentioned before, there's no take backsies. It's done. We're not changing it. And then the other thing is making it to where like we can actually leave early access, soonish. Because like you figure we need to get the co-op out and then take a hiatus to do the research on the campaign, figure out how we want to do that. And then the campaign and Pierce and Natalie are the last elements that are required for us to leave early access after this whole cleanup period is done and the reboot is situated. So there's that. Let me see. Am I missing anything, Derivar, from what we talked about last night?
I don't think we're missing anything. I think you've covered everything from last night.
So let me ask you guys a question.
I think so.
And I am curious. I go back and forth on this all the freaking time. And I want to ask everyone here, YouTube and Discord and Steam community that are watching on the store page right now, what is y'all's opinion on realism when it comes to platforms like this for anti-air? Because I believe that you have to make some concessions when you're making a video game for scale. And it's one of those things where it's like, I would prefer something like these for dedicated anti-air over the stationary Avenger platform. This is a Russian variant, I know. But what is y'all's opinion in terms of having like a dedicated emplacement like this instead of having the Avenger as it stands right now, the Avenger version that you can build in place? Are there any like, what do you guys think about that on YouTube, on Discord, Derivar, hit me with it? Because the argument is the missiles are so large it looks silly to attack birds and to attack helicopters. I don't think that matters. Command & Conquer 0 Hour did it 20 years ago. What are you going to say?
I like that idea.
What do other people think? Let's get some more opinions. What do you guys think on YouTube? What do you guys think on Discord? Because like it's one of those things where like I think that going over, everyone's played Legacy, everyone's played normal. You have the Avenger stationary version, which is like the Hummer version that's ripped off and put on it. And it's overkill, and that was the argument that was sold to me. It's not realistic, but it's one of those things where like I think it's better for it, based off if we look at 0 Hour, they did it like 20 years ago. So it seems like everyone agrees that you guys would want us to go in the direction of fuck it, put the Patriot missile system in there, put something in there that's your counter against birds, replace the Avenger stationary, and that would be your counter against birds and helicopters in the future. Anything that's airborne.
So we got thumbs up. Agreed. Airtank has got let's do that. Let's do it for big airbase and the Avengers for FOB, but that still doesn't.
Yeah, well, again, it's because the missiles are really large, so I guess it doesn't it's not realistic. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like I think the Patriot system or some modern version of that even if it's just scaled down slightly, or the missiles or a different variation, are just fine. So it seems like everyone's in agreement with me, and we should go that direction now rather than later, because I think that the Avenger stationary is okay, but it's not what I wanted. I would prefer the 0 hour approach.
Yeah.
Every time.
So we got people on YouTube. We got people on YouTube agreeing.
Okay. So then, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and make the executive decision, and we're going to switch over the Avenger to be the stationary emplacement like this. Now, the beautiful part of it is that we already have a model for it, because people on the marketplace give away free models that are really high poly for this. So we can take that, edit it, manipulate it, retexture it, add the Cirque branding, and get it into the game when we do the turrets pretty damn quickly, because you can only design one of these so many ways. So it's one of those things where it's actually very easy to put this asset into the game based off of it's made everywhere on the internet, and there are free versions that look damn sexy and they're textured. It would probably only take 24 hours for us to clean up, get it to our standards, improve some textures and bake them down, do some optimization, because some of them might have extra material IDs, and then add in the Cirque branding, add it in so it supports the camo system. Well, actually, no, that wouldn't support the camo system. I lied, because that's a stationary emplacement and not a traditional vehicle. Okay, so cool. I will move on that when we get to the point of doing turrets. All right. So let's see. Okay, cool. Okay, so the next thing is going to be Alcatraz. So let's load that up, and then we're going to open up the floor for a discussion, and I will drop the timeline bomb at the end. So let's see. Let's go to Alcatraz. It's loaded up on the stream. Yes, it is. Okay, so I will spawn right in. Go F11 for full screen. So as you can see right now, it's getting to the point where Efren's kind of going in and he's just kind of cementing the small details that make up the the meat and potatoes of okay, you can look at that structure now and the texture's starting to come in, and the windows are there, and he's looking at the photos that he took, the photos that I took when we took the tour at Alcatraz, to basically figure out what does that building actually look like? What kind of texture does it have? Putting in the small little details. There are some extra small details that were here from last time that we showed. Now, this is the part where level design slows down a tidbit, because then you take your blockouts and you convert them to basically be detailed models. So it would be adding the windows, adding the rivets, doing your texturing. So until Dimitri comes over and helps, it might seem kind of slow, but he's kicking ass and chewing bubblegum when it comes down to it. In terms of he's just slowly but surely just kind of going through and just building out Alcatraz and getting everything situated sequentially from start to finish. So the dock all the way to the main house. And the first major slice of that is getting this building done, getting the texture approved, getting it all unwrapped and modeled. Looks like there's some abnormalities here going on. I guess he was doing some last minute terrain tweaks last night. Oh, I know what he was doing. Okay, yeah. He was working on, there's an artillery gun emplacements here in the real version of it. And it looks like he was basically trying to get the terrain and everything else to match it, putting in the windows that they have there, and then putting in the side rooms. So then that way you would actually have the artillery, because they're not there anymore, but you can see the indentations where they had these huge weighted guns for defense of the Bay Area, during the early eras. So essentially that's what he's doing right now. is just kind of going through and just getting all the sub detail on. And then slowly but surely, you're going to see stuff like this where it's like he's just kind of making in his little like walls. Because meshes are traditionally, a good portion of the time, they're not 3-dimensional. They can be planes. And he's just kind of building some of those with modular sets. Think of them as like Lego pieces. When he was talking about it last week, where the idea is that you take Legos of wall segments and ceilings and roofs, and you basically build a Lego set, and then you construct it real time in your game engine. Sometimes you have one-offs like this structure, but other times you have like a Lego set like those. And it comes down to the uniqueness of the structure. Like a statue wouldn't make any sense to make a modular set. You'd make the statue as a one-off. Or like the Golden Gate Bridge, you could theoretically make that into a modular set where you break it up into repeating chunks and then you loop it all the way down kind of deal. Because you don't want to make static meshes that are too big because then they break the engine and they break shadows. So there are like game restrictions and rules that you kind of have to be within. Essentially, like when you're building these levels to make sure you're not causing artifacting or bad shadowing and all other sorts of stuff. Hold on, let me mute my phone. Muted. So you figure that's basically what he's working on. So as over the next couple of weeks, you'll see him basically like that area is practically done. That area is all situated. It's looking sexy. It's just pending an anime like a character NPC pass. When we get to that point where it's like, okay, let's put some Cirque soldiers in the new ones and let's put them in there working. Let's get Michael to get some animations in where they're tinkering and working on the vehicles and they're walking around on idle animations because this is going to be your hub. This is going to be like every time you open the game, you're going to start in that jailhouse in the Cirque High Command area and you're going to choose you press tab like in Helldivers. Not tab, sorry. You're going to press tab like in Space Marine and you're going to be able to teleport different divisions. Make operators, customize operators, launch pandemic mode, do the campaign. So that's the general idea is making this island a character and making it to where it's an extension of like Circus. Like, okay, you can get a sense of how they are and what's going on in the world. And then long term having it to where you can see the Bay Area because we have to bring those assets over to Legacy because those assets are still sitting in our old repo. So we're doing it sequentially is when they start working on San Francisco North, they'll make a baked down, simplified version of San Francisco and the Bay Area in the foreground. They'll bring it over and mass merge it. And then what I want to do is have it to where your last games, you can see like smoke and fire and like strafing runs and small little things going on, like in Helldivers. When you see like the planes, basically the ships doing like those like bombing runs and doing like the whole thing. I want that ambiance where it's like your last games are a feedback loop into what's going on in the foreground. So where like if you burned and destroyed and everyone's dead, it's gonna look like that from the outside looking in. Because I think that would be really fucking cool in terms of like getting.
I don't think it would ever.
Mine would look normal. I don't know how you're playing the game, but it's gonna look simple and nice and clean. Because I have green zones, I have yellow zones, and I do red zones. I play it just like goddamn Prototype to the book.
I'm more chaotic. I'm more if you were anywhere near the infected area,
No, like literally, I play it like Prototype. I mean, the game is basically a Prototype RTS. So I literally will set up like, okay, those are my green zones. We're gonna cordon that off. We're gonna stop the infection here. My yellow zones are the fringes, the borders, like the zones that are in conflict, and then the red zones are the ones that I've given up. And I just firebomb and I MRS and I send in my hit squads every once in a while. And the yellows are the ones that I'm constantly tugging and pushing to try and bring them in the green zones and save whoever's still there. Or in some cases, I start evacuating people out of the yellow zones to make them no man's lands. Because with the last legacy systems that we had in Cepheus, you had the ability of choosing a zone that was in conflict and telling everyone, get the fuck out. I'm not going to build buses there, but move by the ground and go into one of the green zones. And then you would set up scanners and an evacuation point there. So then at that point, you could get them out and you could make sure that you weren't bringing in people that were infected. So then that way it covered your ass in terms of making sure there were no surprises. Yeah, so it's just one of those things where it's like, Oh, okay. Yeah, that was what they were texting over. I'll just ignore that. So you figure it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah. So that's how I play, and that's how I want to kind of be able to show when we get to that point of like putting in, because it's Treasure Island's over there, Angel Island's over there, and then San Francisco North is over here behind the carrier. So you figure like, and then again, just to remind people, there's going to be an RTS version of this map, and then there's going to be the main menu version of the map. The main menu version of the map is going to be the populated, dense, living, breathing island. And then the RTS version is going to be a clean, empty slate, and whatever you want to do with this island is what you decide to do with it. Where it's going to be like all these areas that are densely populated by Cirque facility items, like these are gone. This dock is gone. The crane might still be there. I'll talk to my level designer. And the idea is you can come here and build like a forward operating base or like a resupplyment base where you send out your squads from here. Or maybe you keep your aircraft carrier permanently docked here. And this is your main base of operations because there's no civilians on the island. So there's no real threat unless the infected come and invade the island. So, but again, it's a risk versus reward. Because one of those things where like with the newer systems that we baked into the game, the carrier position matters more than it ever has before because the sky cranes come from the carrier. So if you're building structures, you want to move the carrier closer, ideally, to reduce your build time dynamically. So that way when you're moving a base, you maybe have like a security apparatus that moves with the carrier just to get your initial base set up. And then theoretically, when that's done, you move it back to safe harbor, like here, or another area, or just maybe you leave it in the middle of the ocean. I don't know how you play the game. Because theoretically, once you start to get the upgrades for the carrier in Legacy, it becomes a situation where it can really fuck shit up. In terms of like the anti-air missiles that destroy the birds, the actual like rim guns that basically can destroy. Like I'll take the aircraft carrier on drive-bys. Like literally when I was playing the game, I would literally park the aircraft carrier and I would launch like assaults with the Chinooks, drop in units, drop in the Apaches, have the aircraft carrier off the shore, and have its guns providing like fire support to basically like landing troops because it would kill. It would wreck Chelsea, it would wreck lieutenants, and it would wreck pods and the standard infected. So it was perfect if you could maneuver it just right on some of the edges of the water. So it's going to be really interesting how that all comes together because like you can use your King, the aircraft carrier, in like the San Francisco docks, get it really close, dock it, and then use it as like cover support as you're getting your base set up and everything else if the line of sight persists. Whereas like your carriers, the guns can actually physically see said target. So it's going to be really exciting when we get to that point of like bring over that legacy content, those maps into this SDK. So then that way we can start to build on it. Yeah. So that is in a nutshell what we got for basically what we've done this week. So let's talk about next week. Let's talk about the week after that, and then we'll open it up for just questions. Oh wait, actually I lied. There's one more thing I have to show. Hold on. Where are you? Because this is a big one. So there's one more thing, and then we can talk about timeline for the next 2 weeks. So let me open up Edge, bring this over. And this is essentially the UI that Winter has been working with for our concept artists, where essentially they've just been kind of going around and doing mock-ups and looking at feedback online of like criticisms, reviews, what you guys have said in the channels, everything. That was another reason why I pinged it in the Discord, just to get people's opinions and discussions going. So then that way Winter could get some reminders. Now, this does not represent everything everyone has ever said. It's an ongoing process. We're hoping to have the entire UI done the next week or two. So then that way when we implement co-op, we're implementing the final UI that has better colors, that has better designs, doesn't feel like a fucking shitty mobile game. Because we've gotten that point of criticism in the past. Whereas like the UI looks like a shitty mobile game. We don't want that criticism. No one wants their UI to look like that. So it's one of those things where it's like he's kind of working around just trying to find a balance in the layout. And he's kind of getting approval for this one. So you can see, I'll just zoom in briefly and explain some of the systems because he's not here to explain it. He got kidnapped by his girlfriend. So Winter will be back as the dual podcast host next Saturday, and Durvar and them will balance that out. of like he just kind of disappeared for a couple weeks. Just yeah, but we have the red being the infection level. Sorry, yeah,
He abandoned me.
yeah, it's okay. He'll be
He
back in a week.
abandoned me.
So you figure you have your suppressor, your flashlight, your current weapon. You can choose this drop down, or like the cases of the Abrams, or like secondary weapons. You can see that. You can collapse this entire details window away. The details window is where you're going to show the eviction, the purge orders for basically like when you're basically clicking on a structure. That becomes like that weird section of the game where we'd have these like awkward pop-ups that would appear that were just poorly skinned, poorly positioned X, Y, and Z. So the details panel is for everything that used to pop up that we didn't have anywhere else to put it. It's all going to go down there. For like you click on a bridge, you can see the bridge's health. You can see where you need to attack on the bridge. You click on an infection, like a civilian, you can see their name, their health, their infection level, what weapons they have. You can, yeah. And then you click on an infection like a blow-up guy or whatever, you can see their information. You can highlight them, and you can see what they're good against and what they're bad against. So it would show you the weapon resistances and everything else is the idea. So he's working out all of that with Janari, our concept artist, and getting all of that situated so we can try and wrap this up. Now, one thing I told him is I want these little buttons, these little like flippers where you can flip through buildings in the level. That's going to be moved from the bottom to the top right here. And then he's just kind of working out the colors. Right now, he's focusing primarily on this corner right here. And then once the bottom right hemisphere is approved, then he'll move on to the other areas of the UI. So the three most important areas are the bottom left minimap, the top right money, and the bottom right in terms of this area, and then figuring out the final airstrikes and how we want to convey that and get that designed. So for the final, because we're going to be adding we're adding like at least 10 more airstrikes. Because, and we'll go into this in a second, is that just off of the Cirque Doctrine sheet, there's 10 airstrikes coming in. So it's going to have to be very like easy to navigate and get more colors introduced here, because that was a major feedback point, is that we went a little too over the board with the monotone colors, and people liked the monotone colors, the monotone aesthetic, and we needed to interject some color into there again, because, it didn't really go over that well. So essentially, you can kind of see some of the ideas here and there. I'm not really sure about this command thing. I'm going to go back and forth with him to kind of like, I like the health bars and being able to see the health bars and the infection level at a quick glance. So that's something I'll go over with him. And the boxing nature, I'll have to go over with him. That's more of a StarCraft 2 type of inspired. I like the more sleek one where you can't tell they're boxes and it's more form-fitting. Well, more transparent. So again, it's one of the things where we're actively going back and forth. And because I'm like overwhelmed doing like all of the game programming right now, or Derek reprogramming the entire game, I had to delegate this to Winter because he came to me and he was sending me mock-ups every fucking week almost. What do you think of this design? What do you think of that design? What do you think of this design? And I was like, holy shit. You know what? I'm just going to let you talk to my concept artist. I'll just oversee and approve things. And I will give you a direct line of contact of basically helping us figure out the UI. So I can focus on the reboot and the reprogramming. He can go off and listen to what you guys are saying for your feedback points for the UI, and then get that situated, get that ironed out, and then we can try and get everything in at the same time. So then that way I'm not having to split too much of my time, and I can focus entirely on the programming, and he can focus entirely on the UI, then deliver the finished UI to me. So then that way I can approve it or make some minor changes, and then we can implement it the first time for the playtest correctly. I'm sure there'll be some tweaks and edits. There's always going to be tweaks and edits because UI is subjective. There's going to be some things people like, some people don't like. So it'll be interesting. But that was something I wanted to hit upon because Winter's been going above and beyond to kind of hit that out of the park lately. So let's get into the last section, and then we're going to go right into questions. So one of the big things for me was getting something playable for you guys to play. Even if it's not the full co-op thing, you guys can at least run around, you can play it, see how the camera is operating, test out some of the units, see how you like how things are going around. Even if it's just a weekly build of check-in, where after every podcast, you guys were like, oh, I can go and play what he showed. I can build some walls, I can build some barracks, I can see how it feels for myself. And that's really important for us. So, as I mentioned before, It took a little bit longer than I expected to get to this point to do it correctly. I estimate at this point that for the next 1 to 2 weeks, we'll get to a point where we can put out a build, because Alcatraz will be in a point where we can have you guys go to that map and actually be able to launch off, even if it's still gray box and some areas are untextured. We'll be able to at least put it in y'all's hand to be able to like walk around and do stuff, and then be able to launch into the CPO stuff, and then be able to launch into the test maps. So you can at least spawn in, move the camera around, move some units around, build some stuff, give us feedback, give us bug reports if you want to. You don't have to, but it's at least more so an accountability and a transparency thing, so you guys can play it yourselves, and you can tell us how these systems feel. To where like if we made an omission or we didn't go far enough on something, or like something feels kind of like half baked, you can play it and tell it to us now, so we can adjust and pivot as needed. So I'm going to kind of go through the next 2 weeks that we've kind of preordained with myself, Derek, Michael, and I filled Dilip Duravar in last night. So going into Monday, Tuesday, right now, I'm going to be aiming to get the structure system finalized for the bugs that I showed you. Get the gates in so they open and close. Get the functionality so you can toggle their states of auto open and manual open and close. It's going to be the engineer thing, and then it's going to be the collision navigation thing that I discovered today. That'll be Monday, Tuesday. And then sometime around Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm going to replicate everything. Make everything support co-op. And then at that point, spend a couple of hours coming up with the preliminary widget, or not, probably not a widget because I'm not the best at that, but I'll come up with the preliminary console command system so the operator can spawn in the more basic objects outside the walls. So that'd be around Wednesday, Thursday. Now, at the same time, going into Friday, depending on who finishes this first, Monday, Tuesday, Derek's going to be doing some last tweaks to the formation system, finishing up the weapon market, getting the weapons in for the assault and for the engineer, and for getting in the base level winters. And then at that point, he's going to go off and do the attack move order, going into Tuesday, Wednesday, and get it to where the base level combat is in. Because right now, the only time that Cirque and the Infected fight each other is when they're in the CPO game mode, because there's a check or a bool change that we need to make so that they understand how to fight outside that mode. So when that tweak is done, going into Tuesday, Wednesday, we'll have combat operational again. Then he'll get the attack move working. He's going to put off doing patrol until next week, and he's going to aim to get the horde mode for RTS replicated. So the idea would be is at the very least, by next Friday, ideally, we can sit down and play it internally and show you guys, ideally, a build. So where basically like we can jump in, we can play it. We're all playing together. There are bugs, there are desyncs, but then we can start to figure out like where are the issues, where do we need to focus extra resources and tweak and change. And then going into the next week, it'd be putting in the patrol. It would be basically fixing whatever bugs come up from that playtest. If it doesn't get delayed, we'll have to see. And then it would be essentially, hold on, let me open my calendar. The mini map. So the mini map would be the following week of going into, what week is that? Around the 3rd to the 7th is going to be the mini map, the replication of mini map, so you can ping to other players, tactical map, so you can draw on the map and save it to other players. Like that's going to be like the 3rd to the 7th. So I would wager that in the next 2 weeks, we should have some two, maybe worst case 3, depending on how things go. We'll have something that you guys can load in and play, and we're aiming to have something that we can play from start to finish in some shape, manner, or form, going around the 28th to the 7th. And then, the 3rd to the 7th, we'd have the ability system in as well. Because we need to replicate from between the 3rd and the 7th. Me and Derek are going to be working on replicating the ability system, getting in the grenade throw, getting in the headshot ability, all the other kind of fundamentals, core aspects, get it all replicated, get it so it's supporting multiplayer, and just keep updating you guys along the ride. Because again, we're doing like 5 to 10% every week of the game. So it's going to be a couple more weeks. but it's again it's a long-term investment over a short term, where it's like we're putting in all this time to just kind of get everything to the point where you guys can kind of get everything like solidified and it's fun and easy to play and you can get the co-op in. So that's the rough schedule in terms of things. I'll have more to share in the middle of I would say March, around the 15th to the 22nd. We'll have another meeting, another update in terms of where we are in terms of the overarching goals, and we'll adjust and tweak based off of you guys' feedback. Because when you guys go in and play test it, there will be feedback and other things we have to change. I'm sure you guys will find bugs that I didn't find. I don't know. So it's one of those things where like we have to stay fluid there. So we'll just keep pushing every week and just keep on chipping away until the point where it's back to where it was before, but it's better. Because I think someone in the group chat put it pretty damn well, is that wall builder is way better than what we had in Legacy. Just right off the bat, spending a good week on it. And there's still a couple more days, and I'm going to get it over the line in terms of basically what you guys are expecting from the level of proficiency that we're going to need to make it fun to build bases and to collaborate in co-op. So yeah, that is in a nutshell what the next couple weeks are going to look like. You know, it could be shorter, it could be longer. I'm always going to be transparent and honest there because again, you guys can see everything you're doing, so you can judge for yourselves if we're doing a good and bad job. And I would say that we're going pretty fast. We're going as fast as we can for two programmers, and we're going to get there. It's just going to be just the consistency to just hit it every day and just keep chipping away as we've been doing it. So now we will open up for the AMA podcast question section, unless there's something else that Duravar you want to hit upon.
There's nothing I've got on my list, and
excellent.
I can't think of anything.
So, questions about the timeline, question about the building system. I mean, hit me with it. Tell me what you guys think. You guys can be honest. I respect feedback, even if I don't agree with it. Let's have a conversation. So, on Steam, on YouTube, on Discord, this is the time to ask your burning questions about everything you've seen today or any questions you might have in the future. Yeah, Dermer?
So, someone towards the start
hit me with it.
been waiting quite patiently.
Yeah.
On YouTube. So they asked, just bought your game today, loved it. Can you tell me what other features, buildings, units, enemies, or contents I can expect from you guys in the game in the future? Anything special in your mind?
What's his name? Who's the person's name?
On YouTube.
Okay, Udapan. Have you seen the Doctrines tree? Because that's what we're going to be implementing, and that's what we're going to talk about in about 2 weeks, where at 2 weeks, Stage 1, Phase 1 is pretty much at the end of its rope, and now it's Phase 2. Phase 2 is basically doing the Doctrines, the airstrikes, the unit abilities, and the utility stuff. So it's going to be like the icing on the cake, the shit that we've had in a repo, sitting on that repo for the better part of a year. And the idea is that we're going to do the non-vehicles first. So it's going to be like the spotter for the sniper, the radio man gains an ability to put down a relay node that allows people to call in airstrikes outside of his area of influence. But if that relay is destroyed, then it destroys that. The scientist can place down a version of that is for passively farming DNA in infection zones. So then that way, it takes some of the micromanagement, some of the hand-holding out of the game where you have to like, oh, a piece of candy. Like, you know, that Family Guy meme where it's like he keeps finding candy and he keeps going around grabbing it. You don't have to sit there and run after everything for like farming DNA. There's at least some amount of automation there, and you have to just protect and keep those research bases online in conflict zones, in the red and the yellow zones, because based off of the severity of the zone, that's going to dictate the influence of tick, of how much you're going to get every tick for infection. And it's stuff like that, but there's a lot more. So like here, I'll bring up the sheet, and then, because this is a long-winded question, so I'll bring it up really quickly, and then we will move on to the next question. And then you can go to our end of the year. We had an end of the year summary in December. I think it was early January. I would look at that, and that has, in a nutshell, everything that you're asking. So if I bring up the share screen, you can see right off the bat, this is what we're going to be implementing in the next 2 to 3 weeks when we get to the doctrines. Not vehicles are going to be last. The helicopters and tanks, we want to spare those at the end because they're going to take longer. So that way we can give you guys some more content, like the airstrikes and the passives and the unit upgrades, the simple stuff. But it's, that's weird. It's scaling it all whippy. Hold on. Yeah, it's scaling it. Windows. Why are you scaling me? Why are you scaling? Bloody hell. Okay, that's awkward. So if I zoom in, you'll see stuff like the airstrikes that we have planned for smoke deployments, the Thunderbolts, the precision laser guided bomb, the barbed wire, the electric fences you guys already have, the bombing runs, the medical carriage supply drop, the bunker buster got revamped and redone, the white phosphorus strike, an upgraded supply crate, Hellfire Volley, Tier 4 walls, which was the battlements, the gas attack. We dropped the napalm for right now in time for sake of timeline. We're going to focus on the GPU. We're focusing on the GPU and getting that done instead, and then we'll come back to that in the future. The air mechanized is left pretty much empty for the time being because we already know what it is. It's the weapons for the Little Bird, the Blackhawk, and the VTOL. And then it's the Apache. And then it's, if I get my way, the Predator drone and a Harrier. But that's why it's kept kind of left empty. And then it's basically like going through the vehicles and giving them more abilities and essentially just kind of addressing the feedback points that we've gotten over the years. Of like having it to where like you unlock weapons for the vehicles over time instead of just getting everything from the get-go, because we had really, really shitty progression in the older versions of the game where you just got every weapon, every attachment, everything the moment you started, and there was no actual escalation. So that was something that we were trying to identify and fix, and having more variations and then building a suite or a system where we can add on to that this time around so it's easier to do so, and then having it to where like there are passives and whatnot. And then like the APS for the Bradley, so it shoots down projectiles from like an RPG, but if you overwhelm it, it would not work. Adding in more Spec Ops weapons. I don't know why these are so goddamn scaled. Microsoft must have updated something on the scale and it just retroactively broke older ones. But there's a high res PNG version that's on the end of the year summary. I would highly recommend that you look at that and you zoom in and you look at it at your own heart's content. So then that way you can take it all into consideration of what's coming down the pipe in the next couple of weeks. Because again, I personally cannot wait to the point where phase 1 is done, because then we start to implement the things in phase 2 that like weren't able to get in before we did this whole reboot, like the newer airstrikes. Like doing a proper helicopter flying AI, and then the formation system that I showed last week for the vehicles, where I want to do that dynamic system that I showed off as a mock-up. Which you guys can go to the last video from last week to see what I was talking about there. Just fast forward around, and you'll find the segment towards the end because someone asked a really good question last week for that. But that's my answer to that. And just go and look at that sheet, and you'll get everything you need. Next question, Duravar.
Okie dokie. Just going down the list. Let me see. No. Grizz from YouTube. Random silly question. I'm just doing the ones that were asked earlier, so we can cover those. Random silly question. Will this area support the speaker system? Speaking of Alcatraz, so you can play music on the island.
What was the first part?
Will this area
Alcatraz
support the speaker system? So speakers on Alcatraz. Yeah, Alcatraz.
I didn't think about that. That's a good idea. Well, like have like a deck or like a computer you can go to, in the same way that we load the music for the speaker system in the base game. You could choose it like music to play on loudspeakers on the island. Is that what he's saying? That's a cool fucking idea.
So.
Hold on, I'll write that down. I'll put that in phase 2. Because that would be when that island would be more done. So hold on. Load speaker support for Alcatraz to play user music. Okay, got it. Next, what else we got?
All right, so we got
Yeah.
someone on Discord, Eagles, asking questions of the devs. Did you guys discuss and thought about waypoints and markers in the screen / compass or minimap for the TPS players?
Oh. Okay, so he's talking about a
Kind of like a
ping.
ping system, I
And
assume.
are you talking about like a special one that RTS and TPS players use to like communicate to each other? Or are you talking about like just a traditional ping you get like in an RTS? But the only difference would be is it'd be slightly differently depicted for the operators. Because let's say an RTS player does a ping, you need a way to show that to the TPS players. So you're talking about just that, and it's just going to be because it has to be different regardless, because they don't have the same kind of minimap, and it needs to be projected into the world regardless as a 3D object. So yeah, when we get to that point of having that, like the playtest that, we'll handle that, because you figure we'll put in the preliminary ping system, and then we'll start playtesting, and we'll figure out what looks visually appealing to make it to where it's not over heavy-handed between the RTS and the TPS. And in that way, if like player one, because you also want it to where the operators can ping for the RTS, and they need a system where they have like the same I think it's like 3 pings. You do like red attack here, blue yellow caution, and then green is just like look here. It's like more of like a neutral one. It's like you do those 3 different types of pings in games roughly. So it's one of those things where like we're thinking about it and we need to wait to the point of like getting to that point of implementation so we can make it look aesthetically pleasing. But yeah, I am thinking of that, and that's on our vector or on our radar for implementation when we get to the ping system in the next couple weeks. Because like when we do the mini map is when we would have to do that. For either myself or Derek would end up being the one that does that. Oh, like a wait. Okay, so a waypoint system would be what we have for the tactical map. We're going to be prototyping during the week or during the mini map of having a system where you can draw on the map plans and then they save. So like in Total War, how they do self-delete, you could have a layer where they like show up on that tactical map and then giving it to where every player can access that tactical map and see where their position is in relation to everyone else. So let's say use different colors or different lines to represent different people, so they understand their placement, where they need to be at a certain point, and what vector they're moving along. So like how I envision it when we get to the point is having it to where like player A draws where he's going to be staging his units and like brigades or like where like boxes, circles, however he wants to represent it, and then player 2 is like, well, where do you want me to be? And he's like, well, I want you to go down this street, turn right, and cover this, or scout for my unit so I know what's coming. So the idea would be is that player A would draw a line with his color, a different color, maybe the same color, and then that way player B would open their tactical map, and they would see the line, and they'd understand, I'm here, I need to go to that starting point, wait for the go from the other players, and then follow that trajectory or that vector and turn right when needed at the end of the street, so I can be in the position, whatever, that the other players and all of us agreed to. So then that way, you can get up to the second minute planning, sometimes hours in advance or minutes in advance, depending on how complicated of a push or an advance that you're trying to do. Because we want to make the system robust enough to where you can start a game and draw and pause the game and spend like 5 minutes planning out how you're going to play this game. And then you go back to that map and you update it and erase it as you do it. So the idea would be is like, it's your war map it would basically just be a resized 4K, 8K version of the mini map that gets sized up full screen, and the operator has access to that, and all the RTS players have access to it. So the idea of how when you go down to the bottom left and you click that magnifying glass, that would be the canvas that you would draw on, and we're just going to improve how it aesthetically looks and increase the texture fidelity of it. And you can zoom right now, but it's not very obvious that you can zoom on that map. So it's one of those things where it's like people don't even realize that you can zoom in on the mini map and you can zoom out on the tactical, and it keeps that location. but it's like taking that a step further and making it more obvious by making the tactical map be full screen, and then having like little tool tips or little things in the corner, or like have an icon you can click on that changes the pencil type or other stuff like that, and then saving that data. So that's going to be new for us, but we'll figure it out. Where it's like we need to prototype that and get that situated during the mini map week, where it's like that would make it so freaking cool for planning and strategizing with your friends. Even if you're just playing from an RTS aspect, everyone knows what they're doing. Where like the red marker, that's your area of responsibility. Blue marker, that's his area of responsibility. You know, that kind of stuff. Where you're like, so that way people know what they're rushing up to and what they're protecting. Or where you're just gonna like sacrifice. Or you draw a huge circle and they're like, this is no man's land. Don't care if civilians are here. We're gonna bomb it into the fucking stone ages, kind of deal. So then that way, everyone knows what they're doing, and then you can delete it and clean it and do whatever you want to do as you're playing. So yeah, that's the vector we're going in for the mini map this time around. Is making it to where you have a war map and you can plan, and it's coordinating with the co-op. So there's that. Next question.
I think it just reminds me of when we were playing Total War Warhammer 3, and we started drawing.
Yeah, that's where I got the idea.
Drawing tool, and it was all coordinated at first, and then we kind of just decided to start drawing phallic objects.
And then what are you talking about?
That was you.
I don't recall. Yeah,
you may not recall. Oh, I recall very well.
All right, so what else?
So next question from Ava on YouTube is: so is this something? So this is something I was wondering. With the TPS, will it? Oh, hang on. Will it be possible to be to? Would it be possible to be to what? Would it be possible to be to play exclusive in single player underneath an AI RAN circuit, like co-op, just with the AI commander instead of the player?
I've gotten this question before, and I'll answer it the same way I did before, where it's like not initially, but that's more of like a wish list stretch goal for us. Because, and I'll just hit upon this again, is that for you to be able to play as the infected co-op, we have to add a Circ AI. So the same Circ AI that we would write so you can play as the infected long term. Because like I showed you a couple weeks ago, we could select the infected. We could tell them to attack and they'd work. It was just one of those things where like we would be biting off too much more than we could chew if we tried to do both at the same time. So like the idea would be is that when we get to that point, ideally long term, that would be the best time to implement a Circ AI or a mandatorial AI. So then that way you can apply directives like in Stellaris, where you apply like instruction sets or like rules for your colonies or your planets, and then the AI manages it to the best of their ability. So that's something that we're looking at. It's on a wish list item, but I don't have any news on that. It's like I take it as like a Stellaris situation where the game is like a long-term investment, where it's like a 5 to 10 year investment in terms of like improving the game, tweaking it. And I see co-op as like a force multiplier for being able to invest more resources into the game, because then I can hire more artists and then we can focus more on areas that have been relegated to budgetary issues of like adding more infection variations, having more mesh variations, like that kind of stuff. So it's one of those things where like that's another thing for me is like reinvesting that money when we get the co-op, because we already know we're going to make more money off of the co-op, and it's just a matter of using it intelligently. Where it's like, okay, like let's use it to improve the game. Let's use it to make it better. Let's add more content to the game. You know, that kind of stuff. Like Stellaris' approach to this. So it's one of those things where like that's a long-term thing, and that's what we're kind of aiming for. Ready to go? River?
Okay. I was off in La La Land just then. Yeah. Is it possible to play as infected?
I answered that already.
I think that's just kind of yeah. Is there a plan to add wall structures that you can walk?
Oh, that's literally what I was just prototyping yesterday. So, what's the simplest way of explaining this without going overly technical? Fuck. I'll show you. So, essentially, one of the last things that I was working on last night was I showed it in my reports channel on the public Discord. It's basically the issue with how we were setting up some of the collision. Is one of the things that I seek to prototype going into Monday is the helipad is an example of this. And what the helipad does is it uses what we call a nav modifier. But I ended up writing, this one does it too, actually. It uses a nav modifier, and you'll see what it does is that nav modifiers take the exact approximation of the object and make it to where you don't really have any control, basically making it to where you can't walk through it. So what I did for the gates, and I prototyped it for them, and I'm going to have to test it for the helipad, the newer version, and then do it for what you're talking about, because what we want to do in the doctrines is basically have tier 4 walls where you have battlements where you can put units on top and they understand where they can walk and where they can't walk. So what I prototyped here was basically a override that level designers or designers can use on a per case basis that I'm going to use to prototype it here. Because if I can get it working perfectly here, then it will apply to what you're asking for having battlements, and we don't have to do what Sea of Thieves does. Because what Sea of Thieves does is that they have a dev zone for their boat under the world, and it's like a static navigation mesh, so the AI know how to move around on boats. We do it for the aircraft carrier, where the aircraft carrier has like a dev zone thousands of feet under the map, and that navigation is what updates, and not the top one, because the engine doesn't handle that dynamic updates like that for the global world efficiently without nuking your performance. So it was one of those things where we use dynamic with modifiers. So it's like a technical thing that we have to work out, and I'm seeking to eliminate that this time around. And I've already gone down that vector, and I'm going to be expanding on it going into like next week. It's like that's one of the auxiliary items I didn't really hit upon that well. Or something that's like I'm going to be looking into an R&D because I have to set it up for this, where there's a custom collision for here, and then there's a custom collision for this, and we don't use the nav modifier because if I press F11, F8, you'll see we're just using like a nav modifier, and it just takes the whole object. But then if you click over here, there's no nav modifier, and we're using a custom box collision that says it's a dynamic obstacle. So I'll be prototyping that. In the same way I prototype that, I want to get it to the point of Age of Empires 4, where you can have units that can walk on the walls, and you have nav links to basically tell them to climb a lit staircase or to go up a ramp or something. So that's a long-term goal. That's why we haven't really showed off the tier 4 walls yet, because it's something that I have to figure out. Do we include it in the next rule of the doctrines thing on that list that I showed you, or is it going to be relegated to like a research and development thing that we do long-term, like the huge napalm airstrike? That's like, okay, like we're going to have to come back to that, and we have to do some research and development and figure out the best way of doing it in the engine that's scalable and reproducible reliably. Because, you know, it's just one of those things where it's like, it sucks, but you can't just, there's a lot that goes into game design, sadly. There's a lot of moving parts. You would think that you just throw something into a level or an engine and it just comes together, but yeah, no, this takes people with like degrees in some cases to figure out the games we love, the math that's involved, or just the corners and the new tech you have to engineer just to make something move sometimes. So yeah, it's fun, but we'll figure it out. We just need the time. Anyhow, next question.
Okie smoky. So, hang on.
All
I
right.
want to open Discord, not YouTube. So, Rift Val. 2 questions. Will we ever have the chance to get the old Cirque transport trucks again? Either Cirque building or tied to the NPC factions. They look pretty cool. And will the open world have select buildings that have interiors that the operators can enter, hold against the infected, i.e., massive parking garages we currently have in
Did you
game?
say we currently have in game?
Yeah,
Yeah, because
the
there's
big
2 in
parking
the
garage
game
that
right
you go
now
in,
that
where you
actually work, and combat actually occurs there if you actually want to hide your units in there. Okay, so when it comes to that, we have about 10 to 12 structures, give or take, that have interiors that are hollowed out. They were removed for the time being. It's the same thing with like the subways, or we want to add subways to the game to open up another way for the infected to get around. Those are on the wish list, and when the time opens up that we can tackle that, we will. Because I want to add more hollowed out structures, but it comes down to we need to kind of not bite off more than we can chew. So that's a long term thing, I would say. Where it's like we'll come back to that, and it's on my wish list because you figure those structures are there, and the only ones that you can really fight in the interiors are the 2 parking garages, and then there's technically a warehouse that's been hollowed out. But yeah, we'll come back to that one. That is a good suggestion, though. What else do we have?
Okay, so I have no idea how to pronounce that name, but on YouTube, the aircraft carrier is fine, but is there a possibility in the future to add any destroyer ship Tomahawk missile?
Not in the cards for right now. I know that the aircraft carrier is traditionally escorted by an entire complement of ships, but it comes down to, I mentioned this previously, the LCAC and the aircraft carrier are our test beds. I know that when we go around implementing their movement again, we'll make even more improvements to their core movement code, but I'm not confident adding in more Navy ships at this time until, at the base minimum, we had more infected variations. Because that was something that I was talking about Durvar this morning about, like at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. we finished up Helldivers, was like the infected need at least a dozen more variations because they've been relegated. Like it's gonna get to a point after Doctrines where I lock out Cirque, I lock out new weapons, and that we're going to focus on the infected, and we give them more variations and more ways of countering Cirque. And then and only then would I consider adding more weapons to Cirque, because the table needs to be balanced. It's like when you play Helldivers and they have all those sub mutations and sub variations for their version of the Tyranids, whatever they're called. We need to do the same thing. We need to kind of add more variations to them. And Cirque has had enough toys to play with after this next push of what I showed you on that sheet. Cirque needs to get locked out, and we need to focus all of our resources on making the infected more deadly, adding the infected sperm whale, Chelsea's elite guard, the chimera dog, the infected builder, a dedicated anti-air, a dedicated artillery unit, and a couple other variations that I'm missing right now. So it's one of those things where it's like they need more attention before we add anything else to Cirque, like a destroyer or whatever. Because think about it this way: you add a destroyer, then you need an escalation of like Leviathan becomes too much of a jack of all trades, trying to do everything. So it's one of those things where it's like we need to balance out the table before we go and do that. Next question.
Okay, Smoky. So, will this on YouTube? Seox Greywolf. I'm just going to call you Greywolf. Will there be a scientist ability and medical abilities
Yes.
for operators? Will there be a scientist abilities and medical abilities for operators? Would there be any chance of a hostile human army who's a bit less ethical with the infection?
Hold on.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we want to go into that.
Yes. That's what I'll answer. Yeah. I'm not saying anymore. It's supposed to be a surprise. Moving on.
Yeah. There's a lot on YouTube. I might break it up a little bit and go over to Discord.
If for the question from Sephirin Crimson, if we do add a Juggernaut operator class, I'd love to know him. Know how. One of the biggest things is that when we get to the infected long term, I would see you being like lieutenants. You'd have like a created lieutenant, if I were to wager. Where when we get to the point of doing infected that are playable long term, I would try and go down that vector of having it to where you make your own Mercer or your own Albert Wesker kind of deal, instead of like just making it, oh look, the reskin with the goddamn gun. So that would be the general vector as you're playing as prototype. So you would have a different power set and different things, but that's long term, and that would be like after co-op, after the campaign. We are out of early access. That would be like the icing on the cake. Is I use all those extra resources and I funnel them into like designing a system like that and making it play like a prototype or like an Infamous kind of deal. So that would be the general direction that we'd go in. Anyway, go next one.
Black Hawk on YouTube asks, I got a question. Will
Hmm?
slash kind of no, will slash kind of add a RPG soldier that can only use a M72 or a javelin for ground or anti-air, a Stinger short range, or a
Where is
Russian
this question at? Where is this question?
K38 Igla on YouTube? Black Hawk kind of coming out in all jumbled words. Yeah.
The assault has the javelin
I think they're
and the
talking
grenade
about
launcher.
yeah.
The engineer has the small. That's currently the most of the plans that we have for adding in more weapons for the Cirque at this time. Yeah.
I think they're more talking about like a
The
dedicated
engineer is our
soldier
explosive
to
expert. It's just we haven't pushed him enough. He's been relegated to a building role, but we need to basically push. That's why we gave him the grenade launcher and we gave him the small. Actually, yeah, we gave him the grenade launcher and the small towards the end to kind of push him more as a demolitions expert. And then we were giving him the drones to make him more of like a pet demolitions expert with building. So that way he had more utility in combat and he wasn't just your generic builder with no real like combat value. Because in the U.S. military, everyone's expected to fight, everyone's expected to shoot. So it's one of those things where like we needed to kind of make that change to just make it to where he was living more firing on all calibers kind of deal. And we'll go down that vector even more so in this reboot for the engineer with me, Michael, and Derek and Dimitri just kind of pushing and upping the ante for him as we implement again over the next couple weeks. What else we got for question?
Okay, so I'm just going to finish off the YouTube ones because there's only a few more to go. Grey Wolf, Grey Wolf asks, are you still updating the roadmap?
The roadmap is effectively paused because with this reboot, this revamp, we're doing everything on that 1.3 section. Like you figure, we're not implementing the old doctrines. We're not implementing the old DNA research. So as we get to each line item, we're effectively redoing everything on the entire roadmap as we go through sequentially. So it's like everything that's been done in 1.2, 1.3, 1.1, 1.0 is being re-implemented every week. So it's one of those things where like it would be impossible for me to go back and redo the roadmap at this time. Right now, we're in 1.3 and we're working towards getting everything up to 1.3 re-implemented, which you guys have seen, and we're doing damn near fast work, I would wager on that. And we are basically going beyond that in terms of getting it to the end of 1.3 with the co-op, because we're not going to we're not implementing the old vehicles, we're implementing the new vehicles. We're not implementing the old classes, assault, engineer, sniper, sec ops. We're implementing the new versions of them. It doesn't make any sense to go back and then have to change it again. So it's one of those things where we're like, okay, let's just do it so it's finite. And then that way, when we leave this reboot cleanup period, we can wipe the slate in terms of like what 1.3 needed to be done. Like we can just move everything up and say everything's done. And then we can effectively move into 1.4 after a couple of weeks after releasing the co-op build. Because my plan is to basically, we start experimental and then we get you guys everything so you can play it. The pandemic, the co-op test maps and everything else. You test map it for a couple weeks. And then when everything's done and solidified, you guys can play co-op, you guys can play everything. Then we would officially say we're leaving 1.3 and we're entering 1.4. And that would mean the starting of the production of the campaign. And all resources shift over from pandemic to the campaign for a minimum of 6 months. So that way we can get the campaign done because the campaign is large. So it's going to take everyone we have to basically work on that. Anyway, yeah, back to you, Derviar.
Okie dokie. So Alicia, do you want to ask? I'm kind of wondering what other maps might be added
We do plan on
if you
adding
plan
more.
to do so.
There were at least 3 horde maps, 5 operator maps. There were the open world Bay Area, which is the final pandemic map, which is roughly the size of the current map times 2 to 3 times a playable land area. Like, yeah, we add some more water, but it's Alcatraz, Angel Island, and Treasure Island multiplied by about 2 to 3 times in terms of total land mass. That would be the final pandemic map that we'd ship with out of early access. And then long term, we would endeavor to create like $5, $10 like map packs for New York, Seattle, LA, Houston, Miami, and basically like just and like spend like 3 to 6 months developing those cities and building them up. So then that way, and then obviously get it to the point where modders can come in and do their own stuff long term after early access release and everything else. That's the game plan. That's the vector we're going in. So then that way we can we can take everything we learn with like all the newer technologies that are coming out, like photogrammetry, and we can go to New York or we can go to like Seattle and we can spend a couple of weeks scanning everything, scanning the statues, scanning like the models, the benches, all the things that make that city unique, and then come home, spend a couple of weeks to months cleaning up the assets, getting them into the game engine, optimizing them, and then be able to kind of deliver on more decos and brand new environments that aren't just reskins of Treasure Island and San Francisco and Alcatraz. Because every new deco that we do, we don't want to reuse assets. I mean, sure, a stop sign's a stop sign, but like there are things and characteristics in some of these cities where they would require hundreds of new assets. So it's one of those things for like an indie team. That's the approach that we feel is the most fair and like and priced accurately. But like you figure it's kind of like a dialogue. So you got to let us know what you think about that, because that's our plan. Leaving early access is to do the map packs, to do horde packs, and then do what was the other thing? Oh, and potentially even just doctrines. What kind of deal? But we'll have to wait and see what you guys say. And it's a give and take. We have to kind of see what you guys think, see what's fair. Because it's the same thing with the Camel, the support backs. We told you guys what we thought it would be valued at. And then we had a discussion on Steam. And you guys were like, well, I would pay $2 for this. I would pay $3 for this. And then we were like, okay, we can make that work. And that's how the support packs came about. Or it was like people that wanted to, support development, but still get something back. So it's going to be a dialogue. It's going to be a conversation. That's the game plan going ahead. Because pandemic is going to be huge in terms of basically the landmass of that Bay Area map. Anyway, back to you, Durvar.
Okay, so last one for YouTube is Fattening Ramsey. Is there any near date to allow players to try these updates?
I kind of covered that briefly before, but I'll hit upon it again. Is that we're aiming for us to start playing it for the next week or so, and then we're aiming for you guys to play it in the next 2 weeks, ideally. I will update you guys on a weekly basis, and I will show you guys why if something gets pushed back longer, and I'll be transparent about why. So it's one of those things where like we're playing it fluid. We're playing it week by week in terms of like it's not ready yet. There's not enough content. Like I could make a build for you guys right now, but you'd have to use console commands, and you'd have to and there would be aspects that aren't refined for the end user. So it's one of those things where like I need a couple more weeks to get everything as refined and user friendly and easy as possible for you guys to jump in and be able to run around and move the camera. You won't be able to play co-op in the first couple of builds, but you'll at least be able to see tangible work, play it, test the camera out, test the combat, test the building, see how you like the new grid step and the wall building in our test maps, and just give us feedback, kind of deal. So that's the game plan. And again, we'll keep pushing it as we go.
We just ask for a little bit more continued patience as we just continue to chip away at this on a week by week basis. And yeah, and we're gonna get it. It's just a matter of time at this point. I mean, we've practically redone so much goddamn work in a month and a week. Like, holy shit. This took us so much longer the first time around. And we've practically almost got to the point of making a game. And we're gonna have I would wager we're gonna have a game guaranteed in the next month. Like, we can play. So we just ask for a little bit more patience as we work through these issues and we make the right decisions and we take the time that's needed to make sure you guys get the best possible product. And there's a question about improving the NPC factions. Yes, that's going to be Marchish going into April, worst case, where it's going to be like, look, I want to spend when we do the dynamic civilian groups. So it's 3 layers. Stage 1, core gameplay. Stage 2, doctrines and DNA with the ability system. Stage 3, it's been a pandemic. So that would be dynamic civilian groups, the infection spreading system, the precursors to Pierce and Natalie, but they're not in. And then, sorry, I say evacuation if I didn't say that already. Yeah. And that's going to be a good solid chunk of taking everything you guys have said from the get-go of dynamic civilian groups and improving them and making a better core so it's easier to work with them for when we add future features or future subsystems. And also making it to where, like, it's better than what it was before. Because there was an AMA where I had with a kid quite 6 months ago where it was like, hey, like, you guys should really add it so you can give the dynamic civilian groups orders. You know, even if it's just as simple as, like, they like you can tell them to go here, you can tell them to attack here or hold here. Just simple as that. So that's something that I'm going to give a fair shake and see if we can implement this time around, like the improved wall builder, and spend a couple of days just getting that situated and making sure it's very robust. Because I know that's been a major feedback point, is dynamic civilian groups are cool at surface value, but they need a little bit more nuance. And it's the same thing with the civilian evacuation. It's cool at surface value, but it needs a little bit more time and attention to detail, maybe another extra week or so put into it when we implement it, and just refine, get rid of some noob traps, and just make it easier for the average user to consume and use. Like the DNA scanner shouldn't have been a scientist weapon. The infection towers shouldn't have been buildable on their own. They should have been modules. They should have been incorporated into the base structures or add-on slots on like the civilian administration or stuff like that, or on gates that are automated to basically, you don't have to sit there and babysit the game. Like, you don't have to remember, oh, I got to build 3 of these defense towers, and sometimes they get overwhelmed, and we get like a clog, and then the game's performance deteriorates, blah, 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 blah. No one cares. It needs to just work. So it's one of those things where that's something of why Stage 3 is just pandemic, because pandemic is like the icing on the cake that what brings it over the hurdle and makes Cepheus in terms of like those infection mechanics and the civilian evacuation and all the other stuff. So that's my game plan. And right now we're towards the end of Stage 1 and we're about to enter Stage 2. And then we'll finish Stage 2, we'll enter Stage 3, and then we'll have the same thing where I show you guys every week how the civilians are doing, what we've changed. We'll have a conversation about it. We'll show it replicating and working in co-op. And we'll, again, like by then, you guys will have a build where because I talked about this, is that next week, depending on if it bleeds over, Derek's goal before doing the patrol is to replicate the Horde RTS mode. So then that way, you guys and we can get to a tangible point where we can play the game in co-op, even if it's just a dirty little test map where you get horde units running towards you and you can test the operator and the basic assaults. And we'd keep building the combat, add the vehicles, add the helicopters, add the airstrikes in that test map. And then it'll get to a point towards the end of Stage 2 where that map is no longer sufficient. Because now we're entering Stage 3. And Stage 3 is going to be that pandemic light map, where we take like a 5x5 city block of San Francisco, and we bring that in. That's the new test map. And then we test civilian evacuation, dynamic civilians, the spreading system, the lieutenants, Chelsea, alternate start mode for the crow movements, custom game settings for the infected. Didn't forget that. It's still all there. But we're handling it in layers. We're just slicing the game as we go every goddamn week until the point where we're back to where we were before. So that's the game plan. But yeah, back to you, Derivar, because we're over the 2-hour mark. So let's take a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap it up, and we'll go play Helldivers.
Sounds good. So we got 2 questions. One that I really want.
Is it a hard one?
Really good. It's got. I don't know if it's going to be a hard one, but
Hit me with it.
it's a good one. So one more question about it's by I have no idea how to say that. Mipatsu. One more question about multiplayer. Will it be possible to go rogue and attack other players and start your own faction?
God, you guys are dicks. No, there's no plan for that right now.
Like that idea.
But I'm not saying I don't like it. Like, it's one of those things where, like, right now, you're okay, so the closest comparison is, like, Wasteland 3. Where, like, you can dick the other people on your team and make everyone hate your guts for the Cirque. Right now, there's no, like, dynamic subsystem of Cirque. It's all Cirque as an umbrella. And every co-op player is operating under that umbrella. So when you do something to a group, no matter who they are, the faction system is still going to rate it, and it's still going to affect the entire Cirque as an organization. So if you go and you murder a bunch of civilians as an operator, or you drop a firebomb over here, because of the systems that we had that we'll be re-implementing in Pandemic, there's going to be a trickle-down effect where people talk. So the closer where the war crime existed, the more strongly it affects the civilians and the natural inhabitants. And then the further out it gets, it weakens and it doesn't affect them as much. So the idea would be is that, like, if you kill a bunch of civilians here, there's a chance that that could break alliance of a group that you're right in front of. And, like, almost instantly, if not over a couple of, like, seconds or minutes, to the point where they'll actively start shooting your operators or start shooting your units. That's the game plan when it comes to co-op, where you're all just kind of in it together. That's a cool idea, but it's not in the cards for right now. Like, I don't really have much on that. I do like it. It just sounds dickish. It's right up Durivar's chart. But for right now, no. We can't do something like that. What else we got?
I would utilize the shit out of a system like that. Like, you and I ever play together, I just form my own little faction out there, and I just start blowing up.
I know you will, because you're a dick. You fucking shot me.
Yes,
I was playing
just
Helldivers with this asshole last night, and I think I was playing with Air Tanker and like another Patreon member, and we were just running through the forest, and I walked by an infection gas, like a flower, and Derivar's first thought was, "Let me shoot it." He shoots it, and it kills me instantly, and I was like, what the fuck? Those explode by themselves now? And everyone else is giggling in the back. Like, oh man, that was funny. And then, like, Derivar wouldn't shut up laughing. And I was like, you shot it, didn't you, you dick? So yeah, he's a team killer. Watch out for him.
I knew you had no idea what it was. So, and I saw you looking at it. And I was just like, I'm gonna shoot this fucking thing. I gotta click that thing because
I was staring at it and it blew up, and I was like, I didn't know those were auto. I didn't know that was a radial, or like it would auto detect me and blow up. And nope, you just shot it because you're a dick. So then I killed him, GG. But and then we kept killing each other all night randomly, accidentally. In my defense, we kept calling on fucking napalm strikes on each other on accident. Danger close, like fucking General Shepard in this bitch. So that was fun. But okay, so what else have we got for questions so we can wrap this up? Because I don't want to. Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah.
One last one from Dumb Brick. Is going back to the auto repair for the engineers. Could we have it so that the engineers would auto repair in a radius that can be scaled to fit your base? This would be great to prevent the situation that you brought up of the engineer dying to infected or running off.
Because if you had a structure right out your base and it was the same repair radius of like building, there's the implication that they would run off and get themselves killed. Now, what you're suggesting is a good, like a zoning system. There was a game that did that. Was it City Skylines? Yeah, it was a game like City Skylines where you'd zone your residential and all that. You could do the same concept and apply that and zone it to a group of civilians. Not civilians, engineers theoretically. Let me get back to you on that. It's not mission critical, but I like it. Like you figure it's not a bad idea. Let me let me get back to you on that one because you figure I'm gonna write that down on the wish list and we'll have to come back to that in the future as a quality of life change that I can look into. Write that down. Zoning engineers based on repair, maybe even construction, site, city, skylines, zoning systems. Okay, what else we got? Oh, nothing
I
on
think
YouTube?
that's it. Now let me just quickly check. Nope, nothing on YouTube.
Okay. Well, let's give the outro.
Side.
Okay, we'll give the outro because we're over the 2-hour mark. So again, thank you guys for coming. We appreciate the patience that you guys have had during this period of time of us just allowing us the time to kind of get through and reboot this and get everything situated. And if you want to support development, you're welcome to check out the Steam support packs or check out the Patreon or the Discord pledging system that we have. Or I think we're going to get the YouTube pledge system working so you guys would have emojis on there too, like on Discord. Because we're going to add some custom emojis to both later on. So that way you guys get a little pledge there if you want to help support development. Everything goes towards the game, paying people's wages so we can allocate more time over our day jobs. And I greatly appreciate you guys giving us the time of day and sitting down with us and just being able to hash out what works, what doesn't. And thank you guys and have a good night or